Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today I have 5 more board game rules mistakes for you. These are rules that I messed up myself or I had taught incorrectly to me. We'll talk about the rules, the corrections to those rules, as well as the implications of the two. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. I'm curious to know if you've made any of these rules mistakes, and let's start with number 1. So the first rules mistake here is for Living Forest. This is a push your luck deck building game where you're going to be revealing cards from the top of the deck, and based on the symbols on those cards, you get to take some actions. You're always going to be taking at least one action. If you bust, you only take one, but if you don't bust, you get to take 2 different actions. And you bust if you reveal these black symbols on your cards. You can see them a little bit here on this upper left. Now, based on the action symbols that you reveal, you're going to get to take strong actions. And it ties nicely into that choice of pushing your luck because you may only get to take one action, but that action you do take is going to be very strong because you have so many of those different symbols. Now, the actions you'll take are generally going to drive you towards different victory conditions by either removing these fire tokens from the board, by getting these lotus symbols, and if you have 12 of those, you win, or having 12 different bushes in your garden. And you can actually take some of these little counters to reduce that victory point count for you, so it makes it easier to go to those different symbols. This is a really cool system that allows you to explore the different actions, but there's one more action that was a little underpowered in our impression of the game, and that is purchasing cards. So when you purchase a card out in the center here, normally in a deck building game, it's going to go in your discard pile and then you'll shuffle it back up, and hopefully you'll get to draw it in a future round and be able to use the symbols. As you can see, there are some cards that even have those black symbols, but they're going to be super powerful in the icons that they give you for the different actions. So it's up to you how you craft your deck. However, there's a huge thing that we missed here that's very minor. That's whenever you buy a card in this game, it goes right on top of your deck instead of in the discard pile, meaning during the next round of gameplay, you're going to guarantee that you see the cards that you purchase. This is amazing. It has a couple of implications because not only are you getting to use these symbols guaranteed in your next turn, but based on the turn order, this can set you up for some incredible plays. One of the biggest win conditions of the game is that fire win condition, and the fires actually spawn based on the number of cards that are taken from the card row here. So the stronger the card, the bigger the fire. However, when you're the person purchasing the cards, you know what symbols are going to be on the top. So if you're getting the water symbol, that actually is what's used to put out the fire. So if you buy the cards with the water symbol, they go right on top of your deck. And if you are last in the turn order in the previous round, that means in the next round, you get to go first, or I guess you can time it based on where you're sitting at the table. So if you can guarantee that you go first in the next round, you're going to want to buy as many cards as possible with that water symbol, because when the fires actually spawn on the board here, you'll get first dibs at putting it out. This is such a strong play because now you're able to combo into these different facets of the game. I really like this, and it adds an interesting new dynamic to the game system, and this is just a new strategy that you can pursue, and it actually benefits you to do the engine building, and it fits into the theme of the game where you're going to be getting strong turns later. So that is Living Forest, and the rules mistake is whenever you buy a card in the game, it goes straight on top of your deck, not into your discard pile. The next game is Phantom Inc. This is a party game that I was taught by a couple of friends of mine, and I was very impressed when we played it. The whole idea is you're trying to guess a single item based on teams, and so you have 2 different teams working together, trying to get the item before the other team does. So there's going to be a ghost player that knows the item and is going to be answering one letter at a time, these clues that you're going to be asking as a non-ghost, and the non-ghost is asking questions with these cards. For example, what is a group of them called? And that means that the ghost player has to do one letter at a time, write the name of that group. So I really like the back and forth nature of this, how it's up to the team player to figure out when they want to stop the information that's being dripped out, because at any time you can say silencio to stop the ghost player from writing if you think you have enough information. The other team doesn't know what you are asking, and they know only the words and the letters that you're giving them, so you're trying to push your luck almost with how much information you feel you need in order to answer your question. But both players are trying to go for that same item. The rules mistake that I got wrong, though, is pretty important, and actually figured this out when we got our own copy and we're referencing the rules. And this has to do with the actual whole turn structure. So fixing this actually raised the game a whole point in my ratings because I think it's a great change. So when we were taught the game the first time, we were told that you were asking one question on your turn and then taking a guess as to what you thought the actual item was. And then the other team would have a go and they would ask their question, and then guess on the item. The actual way that you're supposed to play is that you have to pick one of those two options. So this makes it so much more interesting because on your turn, not only do you have the choice in the cards and the question and the guess, but you also have to figure out which of those two actions you want to do. And I love this. You can ask as many questions as you want. You can start going hard into guessing what the actual item is. It's up to you based on how comfortable you are and how much you can read the opponent's items. You're also going to be asking questions more frequently or less frequently based on how much information you want to give to the other team. So I think this is really awesome. It makes it so that you get to control the drip of information for yourself, but also feel comfortable in guessing without giving out too much information based on the question cards. So this is a great addition, and I think it actually helps out with the pacing of the game as well because there is less downtime because players are taking turns more frequently within each other. So really great change here. That is for Phantom Inc. It says Ghost Rider here because it used to be Ghost Rider, but they had to change the name due to something legal, some legal dispute. But that is Phantom Inc. The rule is on your turn, you get to take only a single action, and that is either asking a question or guessing the actual word. The third game is a game that I've fallen in love with. This is Blood on the Clocktower, one of my favorite experiences. Been playing this every week with larger groups, and I've been having a blast. So this one here has a huge learning curve as the storyteller because this game has a facilitator where you are going to be knowing all of these small little rules things, and you're the person, the databank for all of the questions that all of the other players have. And as a storyteller, it's up to you to run the smoothest game possible. If you're unfamiliar with the game, it's sort of a social deduction game where the heavy leaning is towards the deduction aspect as well as the social aspect. But I think that because every single player in the game has a special ability, then they are able to put all of that together to create this map or this worldview as to what the current situation is. So I think it really dives into the deduction portion more than it does the social, but it also has some social features as well that I think are lovely. And the whole game is ran by a single storyteller. Now, I really like being the storyteller in this game. I think it's a lot of fun being able to cause the chaos and cause this interesting scenario to happen. But at the end of the day, as the storyteller, your job is to not only facilitate an amazing experience, but also make a very interesting one. Make it so that both sides are very balanced in the way that things are resolving or the way that the game takes its turns, and trying to get it to that final moment where maybe it's down to a single decision based on the group. So I really like that you're trying to have as evenly balanced of a game as possible, and it's up to you to make those tough calls during the game. Amazing experience. Now, for the rules mistakes in here, I've noticed a lot of them actually by watching the No Rules Barred. It's a gaming group, and they do a really good job of presenting all of the different roles and the different scenarios, and they let me understand a bunch of little tiny rules that I would have missed otherwise. But there's one little rule and then one very large rule that I missed. So I'll start off with the large rule, and that is the fact that when you play Blood on the Clocktower, you have two teams. You have a good team that is trying to kill the demon, and then you have the bad team who's trying to make it so that the single townsfolk and the demon are left alive. At the beginning of the game, whoever the demon player is, they are allowed 3 bluffs. So they get to know 3 characters that are not in the game at all. This means that the demon has something that they can pretend to be and something that they can pretend to have information for. And if they ever meet up with their minions, if they know who their minions are, they can even share those bluffs with the minions so that everybody has this role that they're able to pretend to be. This is awesome because it's going to give you something to back on, and you're not just trying to pull out of thin air some role that you can pretend to be and hoping that it's not in the game. Now, the first couple games that I played of this totally didn't give bluffs at all to the demon. Missed that totally in the rulebook, so that's totally on me, and it totally makes sense that you need to have that in the game to have that actual backing. It makes it so that it's a lot more fair for that demon team because they just have way less players generally than the townsfolk, and since every character generally has a very powerful ability, you got to make sure that it is balanced somehow. So I think this is a definite necessary for the game, and it's really improved the games, and it's made them a lot more interesting with actually having bluffs they can really foundationally fall back on. So I really love the bluff system, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's up to the demon and the minions to figure out which bluffs are going to be the strongest going forward. I love this. Now, the last thing that I had a rules mistake on was a very specific, not necessarily role, but a class of roles. When you are playing in Blood on the Clocktower, you can pretty much claim anything. It's up to the storyteller to decide if they want to declare if that has an effect on a game, though. So let's, for example, take a look at the Bad Moon Rising script here. In Bad Moon Rising, there is a character called the Gossip, and their ability is each day they can make a public statement, and tonight, if it was true, a player dies. Now, this is really fascinating because normally in a game where you're activating an ability or a card, you have to say that, oh, I'm using this thing. You use it, you exhaust it, you spend an action. But in this game, you just say it. You would say, hey, I am gossiping that this person is a whatever, this person is this role. And if you're right, somebody is going to die. And I think that's really cool that something like this exists and can be facilitated through a storyteller. However, when I initially played this, I thought that it would be very difficult just as a group to understand if something was activating. And so I didn't think that you could use an ability like this unless you actually had the ability to do so. There are some other rules like the Demon Slayer. If they are pick the demon, they could choose somebody once per game. And if it's the demon dies and the good team wins. But that is not the case. In this game, anybody can claim that they're any role at any time and pretend to use an effect. And it's at the storyteller's discretion, discretion at the storyteller's discretion if they want to actually give credence to whatever they have claimed. So for example, say that a gossip that is definitely not the gossip, they're just bluffing for it, says that they're making a public statement. As a storyteller, you can say something like, the day continues, or be like, understood, or you could just say nothing. It's up to you how you want to interpret this. But this also means that if there's somebody that actually is the gossip, they can even talk to other people in the town and have them gossip with them. And I think that's amazing. You can get a group of people that you trust and say, okay, we're all going to gossip, we're going to say this thing, and I love this. I love the fact that players really can bluff as anything, and it's up to the storyteller how they want to implement this into their games. So I really enjoy this, and my recommendation is if it affects a game state, you say something, but if not, you just be completely silent. So for example, if the Demon Slayer attacks something, you don't say anything unless they actually kill the demon. You don't say that there was no effect. You don't say that the player didn't have anything. You don't do anything. You only make that claim if something's actually changed in the game. And then if somebody has a question, you can talk about it afterwards, but definitely try to be as vague as possible with whether that is actually in the game or not. So some things to know: you can always bluff anything in this game, which I think is awesome. And if you're the demon, remember that you do get 3 demon bluffs. Make sure your storyteller knows that, because oh boy, I made it way harder for the evil team in those first couple of games we were playing. So I was surprised that they even won a couple of those games without demon bluffs. But that is Blood on the Clocktower. Amazing game, one that you need to check out if you like this social deduction style game, but you're looking for something that has that really heavy emphasis on deduction and also keeps everybody in the whole time and includes amazing rules for everybody. Awesome game. That is Blood on the Clocktower. Now that we've talked about one of my new favorites, let's talk about a game that actually got me into the hobby. This is the Settlers of Catan. And there's actually a rules mistake here that I've been playing wrong since the very beginning. This is one that was taught to me, so of course I just kept on parroting those false rules that I had learned. Until recently, one of my friends actually taught me the correct way to play some certain rules because they really enjoy playing on the app. So that being said, if you're unfamiliar with Settlers of Catan, the whole point of this game is to put out a bunch of different settlements on the map. At the start of each turn, we'll roll a set of dice, and if you roll the number where you have settlements, for example 4 here, the people who have settlements built on the sides are going to generate that resource. So in this case, sheep would go to brown and blue. You're going to try to put out as many settlements as possible, upgrade them to cities, and get victory points from some passive victory points from the longest road by having the largest connecting road segments here, as well as getting the largest army by having a bunch of these knight cards. Now, the 2 rules that I got wrong in this had to do with the actual placements of settlements as well as roads, and how that tied into the victory conditions of the longest road. The first rule has to do with cutting up opponent's roads. So for example, let's look at this picture here. You can see that the blue player has put one of their settlements into this intersection between these 2 orange pieces. Because they've placed that there, they actually segment the longest road potential. Normally, this character, orange here, would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but because that player blue put it here, they've actually interrupted that road. So now orange's road is only 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, because blue has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are going to take the longest road tile from orange. This is super important because this makes a lot of sense, as you have to have your pieces next to each other, and that vertex of these different hexagons is going to segment the roads. So I think that's a really important rule that we definitely miss and we're completely playing wrong with. So that's very important for the longest road, because those are temporary points, and that's That's 2 points. That's about a fifth of all you need to win the entire game. The other rule that we got wrong had to do with placing roads past settlements. So this is very similar in the same vein of the adjacency and placement. So let's just take a look at this example here. For example, since Orange has now put a settlement here, only they may build a road to the right of it. Normally, Blue would be able to, but because it is no longer next to their piece, they are not allowed to. And this is just further supporting that claim that the settlements on vertexes are pieces that interrupt those chains, whether it be for longest road or even for road building. So I thought this was really fascinating that it affects the placement before the roads and afters, but you can still place those settlements in those vertexes. So very important when it comes to not only preventing the plays from your opponents, but also stealing those big point generators. I think that's really important to know, and it's definitely something that we missed on our first, I'm sure, hundreds of plays of Catan. So hilarious that we missed it for so long, but that's the settlers of Catan. Once again, those two rules are you can put a settlement in between two enemy roads, and that will cut up that longest road, and also you are not allowed to build a road past an enemy settlement. And that brings us to our last game. This is Planet Unknown, another game that I've been enjoying a lot recently, 2022 release, polyomino placement game where you're going to be putting all these polyominoes in front of you and trying to activate these different tracks, and these tracks are tied to the symbols on your board. Now the biggest thing here has to do with the symbols and the way that we were misinterpreting one of them. As you can see, there are a bunch of different colors on the left side here, but only 5 of these symbols on the track. There's actually a 6th symbol, and this is the solar panel symbol, the energy resource. Anytime that you play an energy resource, you're allowed to copy one of the resources that's adjacent to it. And I think this is awesome because not only are you able to get a tile that's a bit more flexible than others, but you're actually able to extend the range of that energy field. And what do I mean by this? For example, let's take a look at this area here. Let's say that you place this tile here with the energy and the water. That water is going to trigger or put you up that water track, but the energy can actually copy anything from its entire range of energy terrain. So it can copy one of these cities, it can copy one of these forests, it can copy one of the rovers, anything that's touching it in that energy terrain as a whole. The way that we were playing it initially was that it could only ever copy whatever was adjacent to the actual energy icon itself, so that solar panel. And that is hugely restrictive. So opening this up actually made it so that you really want to group that energy into as large of a chain as possible, just so you have a lot more options on your turn. I think it's a very minor rule, but it's a huge impact because it's going to affect the way that you play each of your polyominoes, and it's also going to make it so that the energy resource is just a lot more flexible to you in the future. So that is the energy resource in Planet Unknown. When you play it, you don't just have to copy where it's at, but you can copy anything that is touching the new terrain that you've created of energy. And that's it. Those are my 5 rules mistakes for this video. We had some really big rules, very simple rules with huge implications, and some rules that are just obvious that you need to know to play the game. So my bad, blood on the Clocktower players, for really messing up those first couple of games. But very happy that we are playing all of these games correctly, and I hope that you found this video helpful and maybe you picked up a thing that you missed during your first play of some of these games. I'd love to hear if you've made any rules mistakes in any of your recent plays, or if you're just really bewildered that I missed all of these rules for so long. So I'd love to hear what you think, and thank you so much for watching Side Game Strong.